Celtics are already committed to $228 million in contracts next year. $20 million over the second apron. And that's before Al Horford and Luke Cornett go to market, as they will be doing this summer. So that's projected to be a $238 million luxury tax bill, which would push them to closer to $500 million total spend if the roster was maintained with all those penalties that come with it. You know, Porzingis is probably a dead man walking at $31 million next year. Unfortunately, it's probably the same for Drew Holiday. I say unfortunately because he would be a terrific piece on a championship contending team. Next year, they're not going to be that. $32.5 million. White's salary goes up to 28, and that's $200 million right there. So now the Celtics need to get bold. And I'm already kind of in on the idea of punt next season. Next season, you're not going to do anything anyway. Jaylen Brown's not going to lead you to a championship as the number one player, despite what some of these Celtics fans and NBA fans might think. He's not that guy. He's not. And when you subtract a top 5 player in the NBA from your lineup for the entire year, you're not going to be good or as good, nearly as good, right? And so that then begs the question, should the Celtics trade Jaylen Brown? Not going anywhere next year. You're basically having to go through, let's call it a retool when Tatum does come back. It's not going to be the same team that he left that was championship form, right? It's going to be a new cast around him, whether it's 3 guys or 10 guys that are new. It's going to be a new cast. And what is the easiest way for the Celtics to shed a ton of salary and also get building blocks for their future to help build around Jayson Tatum round 2? That's trading Jaylen Brown. And this is not to say like, oh man, like he was so awful in that game 4. He sucked in this postseason. You need to trade him. Because I agree, he has sucked in this postseason, but that's not the reason you trade him. You trade him because he's got a ton of value, not because he sucks. And there are teams that are willing to throw out their premium draft picks for a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. And I'm going to give you a guy who's also an all-NBA player, not quite the level of Giannis, but also an all-NBA player, a finals MVP, and he's younger with less of an injury history. Why would you turn that down? So that brings in the Rockets, that brings in the Spurs, these teams that have a bunch of young assets and still have good draft picks. In the case of the Spurs, 2 great draft picks. The Rockets being a 2 seed and having a top 10 pick, like that becomes really attractive for a team like the Celtics. Now that's 2 of the Texas teams. Why don't we complete the triangle here? The Dallas Mavericks suddenly find themselves with the number 1 pick in the draft. I think you'd be stupid to not use the pick and pick Cooper Flagg as a generational player for the next generation of the NBA. But Nico Harrison has already proven that he doesn't necessarily care about that, okay? He traded away a top 3 player in the NBA for pennies on the dollar just a few months ago for a win-now scenario, which all it won them was the number 1 pick. Conspiracy alert. Check out the video on the channel about that. But you've got a team led by Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis and PJ Washington. Cooper Flagg is going to be a championship level player in the NBA 5 years from now. If you're the Mavericks and you're in this win now mode and you've got a dummy in the front office like Nico Harrison, I don't think it's crazy at all that they trade that pick for someone like Jaylen Brown. And some future considerations as well. They'll get some draft capital out of it. I don't know how great it will be from the Celtics side other than next year. But if I'm the Celtics and you say, hey, here's the scenario. You got to shed a ton of contracts here. You got to shed a ton of money. Okay? And when Jayson Tatum comes back, I think he's going to be a good player. Still an elite player, but not quite at the level that he was before. He'll still have some prime years left. But that's probably accelerated because, he has a major injury that he's coming off of right now. And you can keep this Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown thing. You're going to be tied up into that money the whole time, and you are not going to be able to build a championship roster alongside those guys in the time that they're still within their prime. And I'm going to extend their prime to like 32, 33 years old because they have a limited injury history. And then the other option is, well, you can get the generational guy. You can get the number one pick in the draft. And oh yeah, even though he's the number one pick, he's still going to be pretty cheap for you for the first couple of years. He's not going to be a max player for whatever it is in the NBA, 4 or 5 years. And then you can build a championship team around that. You can get some guys like a Kristaps Porzingis or a Drew Holiday type at that kind of money when you're building around 1.5 max guys rather than 2 max guys. And then you've got your next guy. Then you've got Tatum possibly being a guy on championship teams going into his mid-30s because he's got Cooper Flagg there as the franchise player. And if you're the Mavericks, again, I think it's better for the Mavericks to just draft Cooper Flagg. But if you're the Mavericks, then you're really selling your franchise and your fan base on win now. Now we've got a real big three and a guy who is, Lord knows, in Dallas, they know that Jaylen Brown can play at a championship level. You won an NBA Finals MVP against them, and now you can add him to your team, have this big three, and have a team that would be better than the Celtics. And you'll get a pretty good pick from them the next year, which is a better draft class next year. Everyone's already saying it. Of course, those kids are graduating high school right now that are being in the draft, that are being picked in the draft next year. But you still kind of get, it's a win-win for both teams in a weird way. Because even if the Celtics get Cooper Flagg, and that's still a top 5 pick team. Cooper Flagg, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, like Luke Cornett. That's what your team is. That's what your team looks like. You're still getting rid of a Porzingis and or a Drew Holiday. And who knows if Al Horford wants to stick around for that kind of process, right? I think it's nuts, but it's not as crazy as some people might think. And I know the Mavs have already come out and said, hey, we're not trading this pick. That's coming from sources within the Mavs organization. Of course they're going to say that. They're not going to say on May 13th or 14th that, yeah, we're going to trade the pick. Yeah, we don't want it. We're going to trade it. But there's already been some smoke around this fire that they are willing to look into something like a Giannis Antetokounmpo deal. And again, Giannis is a better player than Jaylen Brown, but Jaylen's still pretty elite, and he's younger than Giannis. He's 2-3 years younger. He doesn't have much of an injury history. In fact, whatever he's going through right now is probably the worst injury he's had. He had the wrist surgery or hand surgery in 2021, but this is probably the worst injury he's had. And you talk about a two-way player who the Mavericks have seen can play at a championship level. Mavericks trade the number 1 overall pick to the Boston Celtics for Jaylen Brown, next year's first-round pick, and that's probably it. And the Celtics continue on with this legacy. They pass the torch from Jaylen Brown to Cooper Flagg, the main kid, a maniac who grew up rooting for the Boston Celtics. It's storybook. It's so storybook for the NBA that Adam Silver might actually consider letting this happen, even though his grand conspiracy was to get the Mavs the number 1 pick. So saying, well, you know what? I guess it was worth it to get Jaylen Brown. Yeah, sure. Dallas, go ahead. Do it. And I wouldn't put anything past Nico Harrison. I mean, we're talking about one of the dumbest GMs in the league. Brad Stevens is probably the best GM in the league. You don't think Brad Stevens can talk him into this? I think he can. And I think the Celtics will really start to explore those options. They've already made it known they're going to have to make some big trades here to shed some salary. This could be the absolute best of both worlds. You'd give up next year's pick, but who cares? You got the number 1 pick. You got Cooper Flagg. I don't think there's going to be anybody available at 3 or 4 or 5 next year that is better than Cooper Flagg. Or even 2, or maybe even 1 that's better than Cooper Flagg. Either way, man, if you get the number 1 pick this year or next year, you're picking a New England kid. Cooper Flagg from Maine, AJ DeBonsa from Brockton, Massachusetts. It would shock a ton of people. It would be a bombshell around the league, but I don't think it's that crazy to think that the Celtics would trade the NBA Finals MVP from last year, Jaylen Brown, for the number 1 pick of the draft and get Cooper Flagg. Look, if you're the Celtics, would you do that? I would do that in a second. And I love Jaylen Brown, but I would do that in a second for how the pay structure is going to work and all of that. No doubt, man. Let's do it. Take on some of Brown's salary, whatever. Do it. Do it. I'm in. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Is that too crazy even for the NBA? I would argue that trading Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis would have fallen in the same boat. But let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It is completely free. It helps me keep my job and helps us on the path towards 4,000 subscribers. Check out the other videos going out on the YouTube channel. And of course, find us wherever you find your podcasts as well. I'm Cam Stewart. Zach Burke keeps us on the air 5 days a week, live on YouTube at high noon Eastern time, and then wherever you get your podcasts.